We're Sage and Rice, and we're back with another video. This time, the video is going to be going down the financial lane, and I'm really excited and really proud of Ryan. And so I'm going to let him introduce this video.
Yep, so I have been a member of SoFi for the past few years, and I actually used their services when I consolidated my debt and got a personal loan through them. And they sent me a message and asked me if I'd be open to sharing my debt payoff journey. It was a fun experience, nerve-wracking, but fun to be able to share and just hopefully be able to impact people in that way. And we wanted to essentially share this on this platform. Because it was shared on their LinkedIn and Twitter live, but we wanted you to be able to see it as well.
Yes. And really, Ryan did such an amazing job. He really touched on so many points in this video that I think is going to be helpful and valuable for so many people that's watching. And any of the topics in the video that you would love a little bit more information on or an additional video on, definitely let us know. Whether it's going to be talking about loan consolidation, how to pay off credit card debt, whether we're going to be talking about delaying gratification, or even as the holidays are starting to approach, different things that you can do for the holidays to really keep the costs down. So definitely comment below and let us know if you want us to talk about any of those things. And of course, don't forget to watch some of our other videos, our budgeting videos, our videos explaining the 401k and etc. Just so you can have a full comprehensive understanding of different topics and different budgeting aspects that may work for you. So,
all right, well, enjoy.
Weekly live streams, Your Next Dollar, where we really try to identify some topics that are coming up with our financial planners and members, or even things that may be going on in the news or on social media. We take that concept and then we really kind of dive into it and say, okay, what are some facts behind this? What are some actionable tips or takeaways that you may want to consider? And today we're excited because we have a guest with their own personal SoFi experience. So we'll kind of get to introductions in a minute. And today we're going to be talking about paying off credit cards. I think it's something that, I've seen kind of firsthand, seeing members. I think as the pandemic kind of, went on and, things started reopening and everything, we've seen people kind of, racking up more credit card debt or figuring out, hey, how do I pay off my credit cards? What's the best approach? So we wanted to kind of dive into that today. And I think for context here, we're going to talk through some examples, some personal examples of what that journey looked like, what it could be for other people. Just keep in mind, nothing we talk about today should be looked at as financial advice. Think about it like high-level education or guidance, and then any examples or savings that we may have experienced. Like, that's not guaranteed. Would have to go through like the underwriting process and all that fun stuff. It's going to be based on your unique situation and factors. So, I think we got the disclosures out of the way. We properly covered ourselves. So let's dive in. Ryan, why don't you start by just introducing yourself to the audience and just tell them like a high level of your background and your story.
Awesome. Thank you, Brian. Thanks to the SoFi team for inviting me today. It is definitely a pleasure to be able to share my story. So I am Ryan Masaho. I grew up from the Philippines. I've been here for 20 years. And, really, I think my credit card and debt payoff journey started from a place of, I always felt like I was doing the right thing. The challenge was that I didn't really have any guidance. I don't know. I'm sure there are a lot of immigrants out there who maybe when you came here, didn't really know what to do and whatnot, went to college, signed off on a big loan, a school, and been on your own. But I got very comfortable because I was making income. I worked in investment banking. But being in banking doesn't mean that you know what you're doing with your money. And I got to a point where I got too comfortable and go and travel and trips and bubble tea, just little things that add up on a day-to-day basis. And I got to a point where I had $50,000 of credit card debt, and it was just so crippling. That on top of like $30,000 of student loans that I still had, and I just got to a point where every year, I get, to a point where I pay off a little bit, and then it kind of just keeps going up. But I look back and we were talking about, how I got kind of started with that before Brian, and my first credit card was, I was at a Fordham University football game, and they were actually giving away these beautiful beach towels to if you sign up for a credit card. And that was my very first credit card, and I still had that credit card. It went from full balance to now zero balance, but it took a lot of hard work, and I'm very thankful because SoFi really helped me when it comes to getting a personal loan to be able to consolidate debt and really kind of get back on track. On top of obviously getting the discipline, because I could have gotten the personal loan from SoFi, but then end up using my credit card anyway. But yeah, it's been a beautiful journey, and I'm more than happy to be able to share. I'm so happy to be here to be able to hopefully impact other people and get to a similar track where you don't have the big load on your back of credit card companies breathing down your neck.
Awesome. So number one, like you showed me the towel before, you told me about it, but then you showed it before we went live, and I'm like, dude, that's amazing that you actually still have that thing. Like, there's no way it would have lasted in the Walsh household. Like that wouldn't happen. But I think, in a minute, it'd be good to kind of dive into like, okay, how did this actually happen, paying off this debt, talking about strategies. But I think like context here, there's different reasons people get into credit card debt. Like sometimes it kind of happens all at once, like a job loss or like, something goes wrong. Sometimes it just happens over time, things that are outside of your control. And sometimes it's just overspending. I think, how did you get into credit card debt? And then what kind of made you decide to like say, hey, I gotta pay this off?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing for me was that I wasn't really saving up for anything big. I bought my own place when I was 24. So I felt like, oh, I've made it in a sense, right? So I didn't have a bigger goal necessarily in mind. And I didn't have the discipline. I wasn't budgeting my money. It's crazy how I can manage a big portfolio at the bank, but I can't manage my own because it's emotional, right? Like I worked so hard. So I deserve, this trip to the Philippines for 3 weeks where I'm spending like I'm a king or something like that. And travel was my kryptonite. And I just got to a point where I had 9 credit cards and 5 of them were maxed out. And the only reason why the others were not maxed out is because I had just transferred the balances. I was doing the whole like, zero APR for however long. And it was so exhausting trying to figure out the different dates and all that. And I was looking for a change. And during that time actually was when I met my mentors and really people who had the kind of life that I wanted, and I pursued them. And I asked for help, like, hey, like, they were entrepreneurs and they had a life that I wanted, being able to not really have to worry about money. And I searched for answers, and through their guidance and they taught me how to properly budget. Like Dave Ramsey talks about zero-based budgeting and really allocating every single thing and then having a bigger goal in life, whether that's being able to retire from a job early or being able to buy my mom a house or my dad a house. And for now, for my partner and I, having kids is going to cost us $200,000. So a lot of those things that before I didn't think about, but now I have a bigger goal in mind that help me every time, before I book a trip or something like that, I think about. And I actually didn't go on a trip for about 4 years, but 3 years because the last one was I won a trip to Curacao. Long story, but yeah.
That's awesome. And I think real quick for anyone tuning in, if you have questions, like toss them in the comments. I have a ton of questions, so I'll keep rolling with these, but then we'll sprinkle some viewer questions in as well. So I guess like you mentioned some of the high level stuff, like, okay, the personal loan, how budgeting, things like that. Like obviously like a personal loan is not a magic bullet to getting out of credit card debt. So outside of the personal loan, like what are some things that you implemented day in and day out in your finances to kind of approach paying off, the 50 grand of credit card debt?
Yeah, delaying gratification is a huge concept that is easy to talk about, but it's actually hard to do in practice. So I told my friends, look, I need to get my finances together because it was so exhausting to, have to pay. I think I was paying $1,000 minimum credit card payments every month, and it's wasted a lot of money on interest, obviously. And I told him, like, I made a commitment, and I told my friends and my family, I'm not going to travel for 3 years. And it was very tough being part of group text messages, and then, people that are planning and whatnot. But it was also very motivating, right? Because for me, like, hey, okay, when I do travel, I'm going to travel with, with maybe less restrictions and whatnot. But on top of that, the little things, I haven't gone to the barber, or maybe I went to the barber once in the last 3-4 years. Not everyone can do that, right? But I think we all have these little things where we can make adjustments. I haven't had cable in forever. I use my sister's account for certain streaming services and whatnot. Making those little changes, I used to buy 5 gallons of Rock Road ice cream and just, cut back on those things, and learning how to cook. And, I'm not the best cook, but it's edible. So just making those little adjustments that really helped in the long run. And just being so disciplined and really tracking, big thing was like going through my credit card statements for the past 3 months and highlighting what I was spending on. And it was devastating to see how much money was just going away.
Yeah, and I think that's really interesting to me, because I think we're kind of hitting on like 3 key points when it comes to credit card debt. I think number one, there's tools that you could use to make it more efficient. Like, personal loan, ideally you lower the interest rate, less money you pay in interest means that you can pay off your debt quicker and save money. But that's not like the be all end all. That's where the delayed gratification, the budgeting comes in. So I think, you mentioned that you reviewed your spending, took like a zero-based budgeting approach. Some people take like a spending target approach. They use technology like SoFi Relay or other tools. Like, there's all sorts of approaches out there. But the key is just going to be, okay, how do we reduce that spending? How do we control it? And then, the tools that help, pay off the credit card debt just kind of accelerate its icing on the cake. I guess, did you experience any setbacks, or was this like, okay, I'm starting this, I'm just kind of going smooth sailing for a few years? Or, how did that kind of go about?
Yeah, all the time. And I still do, even though I feel like my budget is on point, but I still, sometimes, I forget still that I need to make sure that I have enough money. There's money, but there, everything is allocated accordingly already. Christmas time is always difficult. And I'm so thankful for my family, because everyone, have been so understanding, where we got to a point where, we were spending laptops and iPhones and as gifts. And we said, okay, let's figure something out where on Thanksgiving we'll pick names, so we only have to purchase one person a gift, and it was like $100 like limit or something. And instead of spending $500-$600, for the entire family, I think being mindful of those things, and also having grace with yourself. I know that my budget is never going to be as perfect as I want it to be, and I'm not going to stress out. I think being aware, first and foremost, is the most important part, because if you don't know what you're spending your money on, you don't even know that you're off track. But I still go through setbacks even now, and if I don't look at my budget for the whole month, then I realize that I've always spent in this area, or I end up eating out too much, or well, I saved a lot of money during COVID, so that was good. But I rent my place in Jersey City, and my tenant couldn't pay for 3 months. And I am so thankful that I paid off all my debt before the pandemic happened, because I would have been in a very, very dangerous situation if I hadn't done that, and having to pay both my rent and my mortgage. So, and there's always going to be setbacks, and I think it's good to expect that you will have setbacks, and figuring out what is the best way to make sure that you're able to cope with those things.
So, number one, you and your family buying each other laptops and iPhones. Can you adopt me into your family? Okay, but on a serious note, I love how you bring up the social circle with friends, family, stuff like that. Because I mean, there is a lot of like peer influence and pressure for some people, and that's what kind of does their spending in. Not like blaming it on other people, but how important do you think that was to you? And was it easy for you to do that? Like, did you share why you were doing it and kind of get into the details, or how did that go?
You know, I think sometimes for a lot of us, especially in our culture, money is such a sensitive subject, where we don't want to talk about how much we make or how much we owe. And you know, when I sat down with my mentors and really go through my finances, it was so difficult to talk about how much debt I had. You know, I'm supposed to be this banker and like all this ego stuff, right? But when you need help, you need help, and a lot of times people are willing to help if you just ask. And same thing with family. And I think, you know, being honest with where I was and what I needed to work on was very important. Because at the end of the day, you know, our family and friends love us and want the best for us. And, you know, if in any case that they don't understand, you know, then you still got to go through your journey, no matter what. People say like, oh, I want to be private about what's going on. Yeah, but then they may take offense if you don't go to a birthday party, or if you don't go, if you spend money on a gift. For me, because I had already set the expectation up front. For the next 3 years, I'm not going to travel, you know. As difficult as it was to not go to Disney with family, I was like, well, I can't. I made a commitment. Even if I technically have the money now, I still made a commitment, and I need to stick to that 3-year period. And I have. And I went to Cancun last month, and it was amazing.
So one of the viewers loved the kind of the rotating Christmas idea, and they asked a really, really good question that we get asked, you know, a lot, especially with kind of the time of year that we're in right now. Like, what do you do, or what did you do with like weddings, birthday parties, stuff like that? Because I mean, that can really eat up a budget really quickly. So any thoughts on how you handled that?
My friends and I tend to not give gifts to each other. We only treat each other for dinners. So that was always helpful for me, because we don't have to spend money on that. But with family members, yeah, allocating how much money. I'm at a point now where I know how many people I got to give a gift to throughout the year, including Christmas. And, you know, I take the total and I divide that by 12. So every month I allocate that money, put it in an envelope or an account somewhere. So when I do need to spend money on gifts, I have it ready. When I didn't have that yet, being honest, you know, I think, you know, you're even if I just wrote a card, that is more thoughtful than buying a material present that they may or may not remember a year from now. But I think having that relationship, you know, with family, knowing where we were going and knowing that, look, like when I do have the money and the resources, I'm going to treat them the way I want to treat them, and not pretend like I have the money now.
Perfect. And, you know, it's interesting because I think everyone handles a little bit differently, but I think especially when it comes to weddings, we see wedding season kind of kill some budgets. So, you know, really kind of planning ahead, budgeting for that. Gifts, I love your approach and how you said like you kind of plan for it throughout the year. So I am nowhere near like the laptop and iPhone. I don't know, some people probably think I'm a cheap gift giver, which I totally own that. Like I just don't like to spend a lot of money on it. Good. But I know kind of here's what our budget is, and I kind of break that up throughout the entire year. And I say, okay, this is kind of an expense every single month. So that way it's just not like one huge lump sum right at the end of the year that just completely blows up your budget. Then you go into New Year with credit card debt and it's kind of just a pain in the butt. So I love that. Okay, cool. So we talked about credit card debt, which is important. I guess now that you got the credit card debt paid off, do you still use a credit card for spending, or have you just been like, nope, staying away from those things?
My mentor's gonna kill me because they always advise to use cash. But I think when you get to a point where you're disciplined, before I spend, because of the zero-based budgeting, when you allocate, let's say I'm gonna spend $300 or $200 to restaurants, I only have, $100, $150 for entertainment. Before I spend the money, before I go out, I look to see how much money do I have left. So even if I put it on my credit card, I know how much I'm going to have to pay off at the end of the month. So even if I'm using my credit card, I still know that it's going to be covered. yeah, and I think that's just how I approach it, because you get points. I mean, but anyway, I think if you can avoid using a credit card, great. Obviously, pandemic is a little bit more difficult when most of us are home. But if you need to transfer to using cash for at least like 3 months, which is what I had done in the beginning, like an envelope system where, okay, literally carry envelopes wherever you go, where you have $100, and the physical act of taking the money out of the envelope and paying, you feel like money's actually leaving your hands, because it is, as opposed to just swiping a credit card. But I think the important part is that what works for me may not necessarily work for you. There's a lot of emotional things that we all have to go through to be able to make commitments and make those changes. And sometimes when you're not ready, you're not ready, but it's getting to a point where you need to sit down and really understand where your financial situation is at, and what you need to do to get there.
Yeah, so this is a super interesting topic to me, because I'm a personal finance nerd, and there's actually like a behavioral economics principle called the pain of paying, where essentially it's the concept of like how you pay makes you experience different levels of pain and impacts how you spend money. So like you hit on like, okay, when I pay with cash, it's physical and it's right away. Versus a credit card, it's like you swipe it or you do the tap to pay or whatever, and you don't actually see that bill for like 30 days. So what we typically tell people is like, hey, if you have problems overspending, like don't use a credit card, because it makes it easier to spend. If you're carrying credit card balance, don't use a credit card. Other than that, like once you pay it off, then you have flexibility there depending on your personality. So I love that you kind of like implemented that naturally without diving into the nerdy details about the pain of paying and psychology and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it was definitely very difficult. And I'm an Excel guy, so I love Excel. I have my checking account, like every tab and all kind of stuff, and even including my credit card balances. So I know exactly where everything is going. Even if I do it at the end of the week after I've spent the money, at least I know where I'm at the end of the week. Because I got to a point where there were charges in my credit card that I didn't even know were still being charged. And it wasn't supposed to be, but because I never looked at my statements, because I was obviously overspending all the time, and it was very difficult to actually look at my statements. But obviously I had to make that change.
And one thing I'll throw out there too, like even if like you're using a credit card to spend, like, so I recently moved, and when you move, it's like you can't go to Home Depot or Target without buying like a million things. So I've actually forced myself, even though the credit card gets paid off every month, I forced myself to go into the SoFi app, and there's like a relay section that says like recent transactions. And then like every time I go in the app, I make myself look at that, because I'm like, okay, I need to know what I'm spending, how it goes towards my budget, because I want to make sure I don't mess up. So even if it's little stuff like that, to your point, the Excel, whatever it may be, I love that idea. Cool. So now that the credit card debt's paid off, student loans good to go, what's next on your financial roadmap?
So my next goal before was to pay off my mortgage, but that has shifted now that I am in a relationship and we are in the process of planning to have little ones in the next couple of years, and being in a situation where we can have kids on a natural way, it's going to cost us around $200,000 for IVF and surrogacy. So that's the next step. Thankfully, we're in a good place for that, and we're well on track. And I think it's so nice to be in a place where I can like max out my 401k and look at different investments and tap on different areas because I can. But I did so much work to get to where I'm at. And obviously, like, we're all in different places in life and whatnot. But I think when you realize you need to make a change is when it's the right time to do it. But yeah, so, goal is to have 2 kids in the next 2 years. If my mom's watching, surprise. But yeah, I mean, and I think just planning for the future and getting to a point where money's not an issue, and getting to a point where, I can travel first class to the Philippines, which is very expensive and it's a long flight, and being able to provide for my family the way I truly want to. And we have a vision wall with all of the things that we want, from like our townhome to our kids to our cars and whatnot. Like, I think we need to also reward ourselves at some point. Obviously within reason. And just looking forward to those things that encompass all areas of life.
Perfect. Well, as a father of 2 kids right now under the age of 4, I wish you luck. It's amazing, but there goes your travel. So I think, one thing that we get asked about a lot is, resources and learning and staying on top of personal finances. And I think that's why you have such a unique and interesting story, because it's like you learned a lot of lessons the hard way. You leverage resources, you leverage people, and you really got to know your finances and got to know, concepts in general. Any resources or things like that you think people should be aware of? That you're like, man, I wish I would have found this, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, whenever it may be.
As for help, I think SoFi has done a great job, and I'm not getting paid, by the way, to say this, just disclaimer, but I know SoFi has done a great job in creating a community. And I miss being able to go to the in-person events, because SoFi always did a lot of events that were interesting, and we're learning how to, buy a house, or how to, pay off debt and whatnot, how to progress in your career. And I think being around a community of people who are progressing is so important. There's a whole, it sounds so cliche, but you're the average of the 5 people you hang around with. And it's so true. If you're hanging around with people who are not managing their finances properly, then you're going to end up in the same place. Sometimes it's hard when it's our family, right? For a lot of people, but knowing when to kind of take a step back, or take a step out of that particular circle if you need to, and love people through it anyway. But I think that's one, being around a community of people who are progressing, asking for help, and same thing with careers. You may not always get a response from somebody, but if you ask enough people, it's a numbers game. You'll find somebody who's going to be willing to help. And I think a lot of people who are good people, my partner and I started a YouTube channel called Sage and Rice. He's Sage, I'm Rice. You'll figure out why, but our goal was to be able to share what we've learned, whether it's finances or cooking or just lifestyle in New York, because we didn't see gay couples or interracial gay couples a lot growing up, and we just want to be able to hopefully inspire. And there's so many resources out there, I think, but before, you can have the best resource, but if you don't know why you're doing it, it's not going to matter, because you're not going to want to go through the hurdles that you have to go through to make those changes. The blessings are out there. Sometimes we just have to open up our eyes to actually see them.
Perfect. And we got another question kind of related to, what you're talking about throughout your journey, from one of our viewers talking about, it sounds like you bought a house before your credit card debt was paid off. Kind of how did that go? And, kind of what did the timing look like? And did that create extra stress or uncertainty? And what did that look like?
This was in 2009 when the market was crashing, mind you. So it was a very different time than it is now. I was really surprised because I had $20,000 of credit card debt, and I didn't think I was going to get approved. First and foremost, I just want to preface it with saying that you need to ask yourself, why are you buying a house in the first place? Why is it, does it make good financial sense? Or is it because you're trying to keep up with everybody else? First question. I didn't know any better. Somebody planted a seed that I can buy a condo, because my job moved from Manhattan to New Jersey during that time, and I want to save in taxes and all that. And he was like, I used to work at Chase and all that, and he just said, just try. I didn't even think I was going to get approved, to be honest. And I think, if it really is what makes sense for you, try. If you get denied, then you get denied, and now you know where you're at. For me, I guess at that point, I had been working for a couple of years, so I had, employment history and income history. But I was nervous as heck, because it was a big responsibility, and I did not go out for a year. That was when I actually, my finances were great, because learned how to cook, and I learned how to like not go out to make sure that I'm able to pay my mortgage. The challenge was going back to what I said in the beginning. I didn't have a bigger goal after that. So when I got comfortable, that's when like all hell broke loose, and I was just like spending money like crazy.
Yeah, and I think like thinking about it, like the whole home buying and credit card debt thing and how they kind of interplay, like generally speaking, like in an ideal world, like you would tackle the credit card debt before buying a house, because like that could impact, not only your credit score and your ability to, get a mortgage and what rate it would be. It's also going to impact, down payments, things like that. And it just introduces risk. Like to your point, you kind of hit on it, like, okay, for that whole first year afterwards, like, hey, I couldn't, go out, I couldn't do these things because, it really adds risk and complexity to your finances, kind of going in different orders. So that's super interesting. Cool. So we're wrapped up with the questions that we got and the questions I put together. Any closing thoughts or ideas for the audience before we wrap up?
Start with the why in mind. Why do you want to pay off your debt? Why do you want to buy a house? Why do you want to make a change? Because I think, and then keeping that in front of you, as cliche as it may sound, and I used to laugh at the whole idea of creating a vision board. I'm like, that's a lot of crap or whatever, but it works. And because I wake up in the morning, I pray, and before I step outside of the room, I walk by pictures of our mixed babies and of what we looked up online. Picture of our future home that we want with the floor plan, the kind of businesses that we want. And I think that helps me stay on course and stay disciplined, because if you don't know what you're doing it for, it's so easy to just say, you know what, well, what's the point? Why am I doing this for anyway? But because we forget. There are some goals that if I didn't put on my vision wall, I would forget that I even had. And I think from a relationship standpoint, we just got to a point where we're sat down, okay, what do we want in our finances, in our family, in our health, in the way we travel, and okay, how do we now get there?
Awesome. Well, I honestly, I appreciate you sharing today, because I think like it was interesting to dive in, yes, talking about credit card, but then talking about, budgeting strategies, including your friends and family and money conversations and the pressure there, relationships and all this stuff. So like, we hit on so many different cool things. For all the viewers out there, if you do have credit card debt and you're exploring different options, definitely, feel free to check your rate at SoFi to see, what it would look like from a personal loan perspective. If you want to talk through your finances, you could schedule an appointment with a financial planner, kind of one-on-one. That's complimentary. And otherwise, we'll be back with another live stream next week. But thanks for joining. And Ryan, thank you so much for coming and sharing your story.
Thank you so much. It's been great. And please feel free to add me on LinkedIn or catch up on YouTube. Thank you so much.